Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. I'm going to give everybody just a minute to kind of settle in and get comfortable, and we'll start the webinar in less than a minute. Hang tight for just 1 second. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. So thanks again for joining us today. I'm excited to present today's webinar. I'm Josh Bohanic with AV Resource Group, and I'll be starting off today's presentation. And then I have Joe Hansen with us, City Forester for Park Ridge, Illinois, who will take over the second half of the presentation. And we'll be talking about the power, how to unlock the power of your tree inventory. So before we get started, I just want to kind of go over a couple housekeeping items. Just so you know, the webinar is being recorded and will be available for viewing later. I will send a link out to everybody that registered for the webinar, as well as load it up to YouTube, so you can forward that on or rewatch anything that you missed. Also, throughout the webinar, I'll be doing a series of poll questions. This is a way that we could learn more about you since we can't actually see you, and a way to maybe keep you engaged and awake during the webinar. You should have a toolbox or a toolbar on the side of your screen. If you click the little orange arrow, that can collapse it so you can see the presentation a little better. But if you want to actually use the question feature, there you can ask questions in that. And I'll be trying to answer those as we go. And if we have time at the end, we'll also do a short Q&A session. And if we don't get to any but your question, then we'll follow up with an answer in an email afterwards. There's also a chat feature. Feel free to go ahead and use that as you want. That's a way to chat with other people. Maybe in today's world, it'd be fun if you dropped it, told us where you're from, maybe hanging out today. And there are also 3 handouts included in today's webinar. One is the ISA CU code, so you can print that off and mail that in if you want, but we'll also be providing that at the end of the presentation, as well as a PDF of today's presentation slideshow, and then a TreeKeeper informational sheet as well. And finally, there will be a follow-up survey at the end to just learn if this webinar was effective and useful for you and to help guide future discussion. So with that, I will go ahead and get started. So like I said, my name is Josh Bohanic, and we are here today to talk about your tree inventory and how to better use technology to get the most out of it. So let's go ahead and start with a poll question to get you familiar with the use of that technology. So I am curious if you have a tree inventory or not. So go ahead and use your keyboard or mouse and go ahead and fill that out. I'll leave that open for a couple seconds. And when it's done, I'll go ahead and share the results with you. All right, getting good participation here, so I'll go ahead and close that out and share the results. And it looks like, you know, the vast majority of you actually have an inventory, so that's exciting. And then it looks like it's a pretty new inventory. So hopefully you'll find this presentation pretty useful then. And that helps me, so I'll skip over a lot of the initial part of the presentation here, which is, um, which brings us to our agenda. So I'll plan to start this morning off with a little bit of Tree Inventory 101 and some data management. And then we'll switch it over to Joe, who will talk about Park Ridge and how they use their tree inventory. Um, so, I find it not the what anymore, but the why. And, we're learning in today's world even more than ever that trees are an essential asset. They're part of the infrastructure of a community, and they require management. And the best management practices for this are to know what you have and where it is, so you can be more effective with your limited resources. And ideally, you'd be proactive. Interesting that during this pandemic, almost all of the inventories that we're doing are being deemed essential, whether that's for utility right away or for risk management along a street tree inventory or park tree inventory. So good sign of where we are as an industry, I believe. Just so you know, there's a couple types of tree inventories that we routinely do. A sample one, a lot of times that is just like maybe a historic area or a downtown area or one or two parks, or it could even be an iTree sample inventory to get a better representation of of what you have out there. More commonly, we'll do what we call a limited scope inventory. So, common one right now in the East is doing ash inventories for emerald ash borer to understand the impacts of that pest. But it could be any type of inventory where you also maybe just want to do a level 1 survey that you do an annual windshield drive or a quick walk of the park, just to get an idea of maybe one type of resource or just a limited information about the resource you have out there. By far, though, the most common type of tree inventory that happens is a complete inventory. And that's pretty exciting as technology has really facilitated this over the last couple of years here. As I can tell, most of you have done an inventory in the last 10 years. So here's an example of what Baltimore recently completed. It did take a couple of years to do the inventory during the growing season. And they inventoried every single street and included all the trees and the planting sites. So it's important that you understand what the goals and needs are of your tree inventory. It's one of those that I feel like a long time ago people would do a tree inventory because they just knew they needed to do it. And now we're really thinking critically about what we want out of our tree inventory. We've learned lessons from previous foresters and previous arborists as to maybe what they did and how it wasn't used or what was used. And we're thinking ahead to what the future is and what we want that information to look like. So now I'll kind of transfer into the actual data collection part of the tree inventory. Believe it or not, people still do pen and paper inventories, and that's fine. They're still getting the information, and they're capturing it. A lot of times, if they use pen and paper, they'll come back and later will create a digital version of it, whether that's in Excel or iTree Eco or some sort of version of Google Maps. But by far, of course, people are using computers. This used to be a real barrier for entry into doing the tree inventories, but now with lots of good freeware, lots of improved hardware on our tablets and our mobile PCs, and the ever-exploding world of software, where people are really able to go out in the field and collect real-time data in either an online or offline and have truly customized data sets that they can manipulate that best suits their needs. So when you're thinking about your tree inventory, I'm interested to know what the highest concern is for your tree inventory. So we'll do another poll question here real fast, because before you embark on the process, you really need to think about what you want out of it and what your primary goals are. And of course, when you do a tree inventory, you can have multiple goals and get some pretty robust information. But at least being able to isolate that primary one will drive a lot of what your next steps are going to be. So I'll leave that open for just a couple more seconds. All right, going to go ahead and close that out now. And that's pretty interesting that, over half, 60% are interested in risk. I think that's probably the most common one that we see. But it's great to see that the environmental benefits is really growing. I think the concept that trees are assets and they're something that need to be maintained, particularly from a stormwater or an energy point of perspective, and even as a emerging health component. Go ahead and close that out. So one of the first decisions you're going to have to make for your tree inventory is who is physically going to do your tree inventory. The Tree Fund has an interesting webinar coming up on the concept of using Google Street Imagery or different types of top-down approaches. The technology isn't quite there yet. It's definitely something that we are actively engaged in and learning more. But for the purposes of today's webinar, we're going to talk exclusively about ground-based inventories and physically walking the streets or the parks or whatever area you're identifying. I think lots of times people will try to use volunteers, which has a role for sure. I always say that I think the limiting factor on the use of volunteers or potentially unqualified staff is if you're going to try to use risk ratings or try to assess the risk of it. The example I always use, I can't imagine volunteers assessing the risk of our public bridges and if that infrastructure is really out there. So same goes for a tree inventory. When we're looking at risk, we probably want to have somebody that's a certified arborist at least, and preferably with the tree risk assessment qualification. I think once you get beyond that, then it's about how much you want to manage it and how involved you want to be. When you use a contractor, you probably have less management, less oversight that's really needed. If you use in-house staff, you'll probably have a decent amount of engagement. You'll have to be responsible for routing and QC and all the other aspects. And then if you use volunteers, you'll probably have the most amount of work as far as managing and training. So some considerations for sure. Once you've decided who's going to do your inventory, it's really important to think about what your data fields are. And I like the way that this is set up here, thinking about management planning or public relations or maybe development, but thinking about what your goals are and then getting your data fields to support your goals. So from a kind of an underlying one that always happens is these common inventory data fields. I can't imagine doing a tree inventory without these. Condition and maintenance probably are somewhat arbitrary, somewhat customized, but at least knowing what you have and where it is. And then when you start getting into the management of the trees is when you want to think about what data fields you want to try to manage for. So obviously we talked about risk earlier, but if you're interested in understanding how your trees are performing relative like to grow space or utilities or any other infrastructure or something out there in the landscape, thinking about what those data fields could look like. A common one that people initially think they want is something like tree height or crown or canopy width, which are perfectly acceptable data fields to collect. Just ask, well, why do you want them? And that can drive if you really need to invest in it. This is a good time that I like to, make people help people understand that time is money. So the the longer you spend at a site assessing a tree, usually the more expensive it is. Even if that's in-house crew, it just takes longer. You get less trees done per day. Once you have your data truly defined, it's really important to build a very specific, well-organized data dictionary. And a lot of times it would be good to have a printed off almost glossary so that everybody on the crew, everybody working through the inventory is on the exact same page. Everybody knows and understands the terminology and the nomenclature that you're utilizing for this specific project. It's really helpful if you have people, particularly like interns or something, that are coming on or off of the project, to something that they should carry with them out into the field, have it tagged, and really understand what the project is. Something that I think at the beginning of a project people don't think enough about is the concept of quality control. And if you build your data dictionary properly, you can really eliminate some of the errors that could potentially happen during the inventory. So you can have some validation built into it. And then while the inventory is happening, you can be running reports and ensuring that kind of common sense things at least are something that you can run. So common ones are trees that are in good condition recommended for removal, trees that are really small that have a high risk rating, things like that could just be user error or type errors, and it can help you spotlight where to go back out and double check. And more and more we're able to use that quality control with using that Google Street View. You can type in the address, go to it, and see like, oh, that really isn't a 2-inch tree, or that was a 2-inch tree, and we just must have mishit there. But also doing some random control. So in the top right, you can see there's a protocol that we use so that we go out and do a 10% random sampling of each arborist weekly to make sure that they're being consistent and that they're calibrated correctly and that everybody's doing the high quality work. Because the last thing you want to do is get data back at the end of the project and have really bad data. So once you get your information, it's important to think about how you're going to use that. The most common thing would be to write a management plan, kind of an analysis of it. But of course, you could do maps and prioritized maps or different, slice and dicing of the data. And some typical analysis that happens, is looking at population diversity, looking at any trends you might see in your data. Again, thinking about why you want the inventory and what your goals were, and taking the information you have now, and now's your chance to project that information out to the world so that everybody can see what you have. And it was good to see that almost 40% of you are interested in doing a tree inventory to understand the environmental benefits. So I really can't imagine doing a tree inventory these days and not looking at the iTree benefits of it. Right now the iTree Eco is the standard for what everybody's running their data through. That gets you the most real, localized benefit information. You still can use some of the legacy information out there. You can customize it for what you want. But definitely getting that information and then sharing that information is really valuable. And of course, I always say the biggest thing about doing a tree inventory is the easiest part is getting it done and getting everybody excited. It's just similar to a tree planting effort. It's really easy to get trees in the ground. The challenge is managing it. Once a tree inventory is done, it's keeping it up to date. It's a biological asset out there that's changing. So how are you going to do that? And that's where we're going to turn this over to Joe now, and he's going to talk about how he uses technology, and specifically TreeKeeper, to manage his data. So Joe, I will go ahead and make you the presenter and give you control here.
Right, hello everybody. Thanks for coming out to watch this. I kind of wanted to share with you how we utilize all this data once it's all been collected, and what you can do with it. Basically, it's very flexible, and it's enveloped our entire day-to-day operation. Everything we do is basically ran with TreeKeeper. So background, Park Ridge. We're located in a northwest suburb of Illinois and Cook County, about 38,000 residents, just over 7 square miles, borders with Chicago, Des Plaines, Niles, and Rosemont. What does your community have software? Do you want to run that, Josh?
Yeah, let me go ahead and run that right now. All right, so that's open. We'll leave it open just for a couple seconds here.
Yeah, I was just kind of interested in seeing if you guys do have an inventory, if you're utilizing software, if you're using a paper-based inventory.
All right, 5 more seconds. Get your votes in. Vote early, vote often. All right, I'm going to close it out and I'll share it with you. It looks like about 30% of them are using TreeKeeper, 30% are using a different type of tree inventory software, and the other 30% wish they had something. So. All right, there you go, Joe. Go for it. Take it back.
All right, so as Josh said, we are using TreeKeeper. Whoops, sorry, guys. Whoops, sorry, guys. Our forestry division, basically, we maintain over 21,000 parkway trees. We manage contracts related to tree care. We're kind of unique in the suburbs in the Chicago area where we don't have an in-house forestry crew. Pretty much 98% of what we do is contracted out. We do have a grounds crew that handles like hangers, or they'll clear a tree that falls in the roadway, things like that. But basically all of our removal, cycle prune, T&M, all that stuff is handled by contract. We also enforce the tree preservation ordinance, which is very robust. We also conduct building plan reviews. Some of the snapshots of that. This is our budget. We're working with, looks pretty substantial when you're looking at it like this. But as I like to always point out to people, I don't know where everybody's from, but in our area, maintenance worker in public work is probably averaging out about 70 grand a year plus overtime, plus another maybe 15 or 20 in the benefits that the city's paying. So we're looking at about 100 grand per guy, plus all the equipment and everything. So really, this isn't too different from that. Last year, we conducted 756 resident inspection requests. These are generally come from people who call us and say, hey, my tree looks sick or it's dead, things like that. We reviewed 443 tree removal permit applications, 343 building plan reviews, and of that generated work for contractors, which included over 500 parkway tree removals. We pruned 160 trees off cycle. Otherwise, we prune a section of town every year. It's broken up into 6 sections, 3,000 trees each. And then we also planted 600 trees. So to manage all of that, again, we're using TreeKeeper here, and this is a basic overview of what our city looks like with all of the dots. This is my life, is just chasing around these dots. Generally, I'm not working with the screen populated with all of these sites. I work with just the basic map. But one thing to consider is that we all understand what we're looking at. So whether we have a tablet or a computer in front of us to look at the software, it's important that myself, the city forester Brandon, our grounds crew, and our contractor understands what we're looking at when we're in the field. So basically the way TreeKeeper or Davey handles it is everything goes by direction of travel. So in this depiction, you're looking at the front of the property. These would be the front sites, so F1, F2, F3, F for front, side away because you're going away from the front. And then you have your rear sites, and then you have your side 2 sites. So that way, if you're out there standing there looking at a house, and again, you don't have the software with you, you understand what you're looking at. So if you need to make a paper note or something like that, you can bring it back to your office. and work from there. So all of our contractors understand what that is and how that works. Basically, everything that we're doing, I'm running off of an iPad. I also have a Surface that I use too, but I'm literally every day I'm driving around chasing these dots. And each of these dots on this map represents a whole slew of different reasons that I may be visiting there. I may be going there to review a tree removal permit. I may be going to a site to do a tree inspection. I may be going there to see if there's a code violation that somebody complained about, but this helps us track all of our work that way. The way that that's set up is in TreeKeeper, you can set up quick filters. So one of the really cool things about TreeKeeper and any kind of technology like this is you could search probably thousands of different types of parameters, almost anything that you can imagine. And instead of researching every single time, you can just basically save the search and it turns it into a quick filter. So this is where most of our common tasks are set up here. We can create these on the fly if we're working on a special project or anything like that. All of our field work is pretty much put here under these categories. So it's going to be a little difficult to show you without doing it live, but I'm going to try to kind of walk you through how it works. But if you look at the screen here, we have work type, and you can see there's a call inspection. That's basically a resident who would call up and again and say, hey, there's a crack in my tree. I'm worried it's going to fall in my house. Can you come and take a look at it? That would go under a call inspection. Final inspections at the completion of the building project, we go out and do a final inspection just like any of the other inspectors in the city. Permit, that's for right-of-way permit review. If someone wants to remove a parkway tree, which we generally don't allow, or if they want to prune it, they have to get a permit. And then we have the permit for tree removal, and then plan review. So if anything is put in under those categories or those work type categories, and I use this quick filter called inspections and permits, it'll show up basically on the map for me. So what are you guys recording your work or call history at all?
All right, let's go ahead and launch this poll. Almost done, got half you voted, so a couple more seconds. Getting some good questions coming in, so keep those coming, and then, like I said, we'll answer them at the end. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and close it out. It looks like about half do record both work and calls, and about 20% are only recording work, a couple calls, and then the rest wish they were.
All right. So what I'm doing here in Park Ridge is there is a section, there's a type work type basically in TreeKeeper that you could save calls in. So you can enter notes and record that someone is called. But I'm actually just tracking everything on a spreadsheet that I keep open on a separate monitor. The reason I do that is it's just easier for me to quickly search. But all of the history that we're collecting anytime we go out to the site to look at it, to look at trees, or for any reason we're visiting a site, that's recorded. So that's important information that we want to collect. But how does it all work? Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to have a resident who's going to call in, and he's going to be either a nice guy or a mean guy, who knows. In this case, let's just say it's a nice guy. We're going to ask him his name, his address, and his telephone number, and why is he calling. So in this case, this guy has let's just say he has a silver maple and it has black spots on the leaves, and he wants us to take a look at it. Now, we don't know we know what the reason is why he's calling, right? And we know right away that we don't even probably need to go look at this tree. It's probably something simple. But since he called and he requested us to look at it, we're going to go out and we're going to take a look and see if there's anything else going on with the tree, or any other kind of risk associated with it that we may be able to abate. So we're going to create a new work record. All of our site visits we put under the private site. So all those dots that we saw on the map earlier, those aren't all just trees. Those are also all of our private sites. The reason we don't put site inspection visits on the tree itself is because trees come and go, for one thing. And then the other reason is if someone calls and they live on a large corner lot, there could be 8 or 10 trees on that property, and we wouldn't know which one to put it in. And most of the time, the resident doesn't know what the species is anyway. So that's why everything's put under the private site. Now we can search everything in the quick filters. With that quick filter, we have pre-set up again, excuse me. So once we get out in the field, we're going to conduct that search with the quick filter. We're going to go out there and look at everything. We're going to enter any field notes after the inspection, and then we're going to create work requests for specific trees if work is needed on them. So this is what a work record looks like. There's a project type. We're going to get into the project in a little bit further, but for anything that we're doing in-house, the project is just internal. And then the work type again. So this is a call inspection that we were doing. I had black spots on his maple tree. Priority level, there's a couple different priority levels. We pretty much set all of our call inspections on medium. We'll talk about a little bit further for storm response, how we prioritize stuff, but everything we just do under medium. We're going to enter the work crew, which in this case is myself, Brandon, the city forester, also would be another one who would be under the call inspection. And then we're also going to, this is where we're going to put the comments. So we're going to put, again, the guy's name, telephone number, and what he's requesting. So here he's asking to leave a door card in the mailbox. So when we go out to these inspections, and all the other stuff on here is auto-populated. So the request date, the status requested, condition, all that, that's all auto-populates. And then the status we're going to talk about a little bit further too. So when you create a work record, it automatically puts it down as requested. If you were creating a work record for a contractor, once you sent it out to them, you would change that to scheduled. And then once it's complete, obviously you change it to complete. These are the door cards that we leave when we go out. It makes it a lot easier than having to call people back and tell them what we saw. So Brandon already had a door card system worked out prior to my arrival, and then we kind of collaborated and put a lot of their common stuff on the back. So just real quick, I'll just kind of go through it. I know it's not super important to tree inventory, but a lot of people are interested in this, and everyone wants copies of it whenever I show it to them. Other foresters, I mean, just tick boxes. So parkway tree removal, and then we would write the reason. Typically, I would just write declining health. I wouldn't write something like tree is rotten and about to fall or something like that. Parkway tree pruning, it will be pruned for the following reasons, or it will not be pruned. It'll be pruned during the cycle prune. And then tree condition inspection. Usually I just keep everything really simple. Same with any kind of comments that I'm putting in TreeKeeper. I'm keeping it simple. Tree appears to be in fair condition at this time. Continue to monitor and let us know if something changes. Or if it's something like that tar spot, then I'll just check that box and I'll say see back, and then they can flip the back of the card over and read about tar spots. And then there's a couple other things down there too. History is very important with a lot of these sites. So if you look on your left, you'll see an enormous amount of inspections for this particular address. So this kind of tells us too what the priority level is for something sometimes. So in this case, we didn't even put the resident's name and phone number in the comments because we know who they are, right? They've been calling us pretty much every single year for years. And in these post-work comments, I would put something a little more detailed. So since this person is calling a lot and is concerned about the health or condition of their trees for any number of reasons, I want whoever's reading this next year or 10 years down the road, if I'm not here anymore, to understand that what this resident was calling about is not a big deal. Obviously, it's just a 2-inch limb that was down. See here. I'm sorry, guys. It's like I'm skipping up a little bit here. Okay, so now if we were out doing an inspection at the site and then we decided, you know what, this tree does need to be removed or it does need to be pruned, now this is the point where we would create a work request or work record for our contractors or our in-house crew. And the way that that works is I would close out that private site work order, I would put on there tree is F2, sugar maple is dead, tag for removal, left door card. And then I would immediately open up the site for that tree. In this case, the inventory says it's a 16-inch sugar maple. We would enter it in like this. If you note, the project now is FY20 tree removal and stump. So again, I'm going to move it. We're going to talk about this project in a little bit too. But basically with these projects is we can enter budget amounts and it'll subtract costs. So we can keep real-time tracking of costs. And I'll show you how that works in a little bit. The work type is remove tree. Status is requested because we haven't sent it to the contractor yet. It's just been created. Work crew, actually this one's entered wrong, so that should be work crew, what our contractor is. And then you can enter time in here too. We typically are not using that, but cost is very important. So we have inch prices from our contractor for tree removal, so I just keep a little spreadsheet in my truck where I can quickly look at the size. So in this case, it's actually a 17-inch tree, and that's what the cost is. And then I put in the comments the details so the contractor can see it. Remove 17-inch F2 sugar maple, tag number 9389. We put unique tag IDs on every tree to make sure that they're not removing the wrong tree. And then we also have some reforestation information that we put in those comments, and that's for us for later use. So that RF means room for, so room for one. And in this case, we're not going to put another shade tree back in here. We're going to put an ornamental because there's not really quite enough room here. So that information will be put on another spreadsheet later for future tracking. And then we create another separate work record here for the stump. And that's just the reason that is because the invoices come in separate. So once we issue the work order to the contractor, they'll remove the tree, they'll invoice us for it, and then they'll come back for the stump and the site restoration and then invoice us for that later. So we also have quick filters set up for work that's requested for the contractor. So during our busy season, about every 2 weeks, we're sending our contractor new work orders. Basically, once you click that quick filter, there's a grid that shows on the bottom of TreeKeeper. Which sorry, I didn't have the screenshot. I didn't do a screenshot of it. But you can export that to Excel. And you can sort it however you want. And actually, you can sort it however you want in TreeKeeper too, and then save those grid layouts. So we pretty much just send this out to the contractor, and then wait for them to do the work. And the way that we're going to track all of this work is Brandon is going to email that spreadsheet to the contractor. He's going to be pretty excited about it. And shortly after that, the contractor is going to do the work, and then they're going to send us an invoice. Now, once they send us the invoice, we have administrative assistant Carol, who takes care of a lot of this stuff. So what she's going to do is she's going to mark in TreeKeeper that that particular tree is completed, and then she's going to put an I into the post-work comment. And at the same time, we're going to change that. She's going to change the species from, in this case, a silver maple. She's going to change it to a stump. So right away, we're updating the inventory. So we know there's no longer a tree there now. It's just a stump that's there. The reason that we put an I into there is because we need to be able to search for quality assurance to make sure that they're actually doing the work. So after she enters, marks all those as complete and puts an I into the post-work comment. Now Brandon's going to go out and he's going to check. He's going to follow all the dots around on a map and check to make sure everything's complete. If it's complete and everything checked out, then he's going to change that I to a C. That way he knows that he was out there, he looked at it, and the work was indeed complete. And then we can move on to the next thing. Another way that we track work is this is a big one. It's like I said, every year we do that cycle prune. We're doing about, a little more than 3,000 trees. So what we're looking at here is the entire zone, which encompasses all of those trees in that area of the city. All of those yellow dots represent trees that we have not been invoiced for. So they may have actually done the work, or then they just haven't sent us an invoice for it. So in this case, they worked from west to east, and you can see that's why there's a big clump of trees still there on the northeast side of town. But it's just a way for us to quickly look and see where they're at. We do get weekly updates for them. And then the way that we generate this is, like I said, the city is broken up into 6 zones. So when you click on a tree, one of those data fields is zones. And zones are letters A, B, C, D, etc. So when we're about to do the cycle prune, we'll select the entire zone, and then we can global edit all of those trees with a couple clicks and put them all down under the project for FY20 cycle prune and put them as scheduled. That's pretty cool. So for budget forecasting, the project tracking is really cool. So again, we were just talking about earlier, if we're doing a call inspection, the project type would be internal. If it's going out to the contractor for the tree removals, for example, it would be FY20 tree and stump removal. So that's what we have selected here, is the FY20 tree and stump removal. You can see our total budget was $250,000. It's estimating that we have almost $33,000 remaining. Now, you can see that they've already completed about $186,000. We have just over $31,000 scheduled. So that's scheduled, again, that means that's what we've sent to the contractor, and they either didn't complete it or we haven't been invoiced for it yet. Most likely it's because we just haven't been invoiced yet. And then that $730 in requested, that's work that we have entered into the system, but we have not yet sent it to the contractor. So you can kind of see with the FY20 T&M pruning. So time and material, that's for base storm work or any kind of hourly work. So if they're just going out to prune a tree, that's the time and material per man hour. We can't forecast that very well because we don't know if it's going to take 2 or 3 or 4 hours. So when we're creating a work record for it, we can't put in a cost for that. We can only do that for our tree removal. But that's very helpful in trying to figure out where we're at with budget. Another cool thing that we're able to do, again, the software is very flexible. So usually I just work off of the regular map view. I don't work off of the satellite view very often, but when I do, it's for a couple of reasons. What we did was we asked Davey to upload all of our data that we had from our in-house GIS. So one of the first things, is we uploaded all of the parcel information. So we know where all the property lines are for everything in the city. Now, it's not an exact view, obviously, but it's within a couple feet when you're looking at a satellite view like this. So that's really helpful in knowing where you're at sometimes, or just trying to determine property lines, or if it's in your right-of-way or not. That's really useful. We've also put all of our utilities in. So all of our underground utilities are inventoried already. So it was pretty easy for us to merge all that into TreeKeeper. That's very helpful. We use this a lot because we're doing, again, a lot of plan reviews. So something as simple as someone's doing an addition on their home and they need to upgrade their water service. I'm reviewing that permit. I kind of want to know where the water main is so I know where they're connecting to. And then I want to know what trees are in the parkway and what kind of potential impact that's going to have. And then you can click on each one of the utilities and it'll give you a whole slew of information, probably more information than I need to know, but it's there if you need it. Let's see here. So with data quality, I think the original inventory was done in 2012. It took a couple of years. They did it in sections or in segments. As we talked about, sites are continually updated as trees are removed. During the winter, when it's a little slower, that's when I'll go in and I'll update all the plantings that we did the year prior. Starting in 2018, we began updating each zone. So with each of those cycle prune zones that we do each year, it's about 3,000 trees again. What we wanted, since the original inventory started in 2012, we have a lot of trees that have calipered up in a new bracket sizing. So the way our contract works for cycle prune is trees are done by bracket sizes. So 20 to 30 inch, 31 to 40 inch, etc. And it's a different cost depending on what bracket size. So we have a tree, and we're only doing cycle prune on trees that are over 5 inches in diameter. So we have a tree that was, say like a frontier elm or something that was 4 inches in diameter in 2014, and we're coming up to cycle prune. It's probably calipered up, to like 6 inches at least by then. So that's not so big of a deal when you have one, but when you have 3,000 trees, your numbers can start getting a little bit skewed. So we're collecting basic data now. So we go out to bid, and actually Davey has done it the past 2 years. They'll go out and they'll collect basic data for that zone. So we're able to have up-to-date data for that particular zone, and then we have exact cost. We know exactly what it's going to cost us for that cycle prune. Not an approximate number, dead on exact. And then the other cool thing about that is we get a chance to get eyes on the tree then. So that general data they're collecting is just species, size, and condition. And the condition's important because when we're driving from point A to point B, obviously we're always doing little windshield surveys as we're going, but we can miss stuff. So nice having someone on the ground looking a little bit closer while they're updating all of that data. Again, the software is very flexible. One of the major things that we found for it was for major storm response. In November of 2018, we had overnight rain, heavy snow. I don't think it was a huge snow. It might have only been like 7 or 8 inches or something, but it created a lot of havoc around town. Generated about 166 requests in just over 24 hours, and we needed a way to track all of this and prioritize our work quickly. So we asked the administrative assistants in the office to ask them general questions. So if someone was calling about a limb that was down, we wanted to know, the size of it, was it on anything, things like that. And then we created a new work type. So instead of just call inspection, we just dated it. I forget. I think it was November 26th. So we dated it 11/26/18 storm, and then we had them prioritize all those calls. So that priority that we usually put on medium, we had them prioritize everything from low, medium, and high. So if it was in the road, that's a high priority. We need to take care of it now. If it's in the parkway and it's just on the ground, then that was the low priority. But we were able to go out and look at every single one of these requests within a couple days. Obviously, all the high priority stuff was done on day one. And then after that, we actually drove street by street and still generated a lot of additional work for our contractors. But that actually helped us set up our storm response plan that we just developed. So now if the major storm event comes, we're going to do the same thing. and that's all in writing as part of an actual policy and procedures for a major storm event. And it helps us quantify everything, right? So we know exactly how much everything costs, and we're able to show our bosses, for example, or city council if need be, what may not have seemed like a huge storm if you're sitting in your house for 2 days, but for us, it was pretty hectic, and it shows them the value of their software and why we need it. So basically, that's just a couple of the things that I had. I mean, there's a lot of different things that we use this software for, but that's how we run our day-to-day operations. And I don't know. I hope you guys kind of took a little bit away from that. I know when I started working in Park Ridge, I was amazed at how robust the software was and how helpful it could be. I think a lot of communities during the ash high kind of went out and got inventory and they figured out where all their ash were and how much it was going to cost to remove it, and that was kind of the end of it. I think a lot of people never kind of followed through with utilizing some of that data that we had. It's really not that hard to keep up on it once you start using it. So anyway, I appreciate you guys listening.
Great, thanks, Joe. Yeah, so we have a couple good questions here, and feel free to. I've been answering quite a few as we go, and there's still some more coming in. But Joe, here's one that Michael King asked. He noticed in the tree card an option for residents to hire a certified arborist to prune the public trees by obtaining a right-of-way permit. Is that work recorded in the city's inventory? And does the city have a preferred list of arborist tree care companies? And are you providing them pruning specs? And what happens if the resident over prunes or screws up?
So we are not. We obviously have the ability to track that the tree was pruned in TreeKeeper. We unfortunately do not always remember to put it in, but we are tracking all of those permits in the city's permitting software. So we can track it like that. We don't provide a list of preferred companies, but we do require that they are certified arborists, and the contractor does have to be licensed with the city and have good insurance, which we check to make sure. And if they do too much, then I mean we do have a very robust, again, tree preservation ordinance. However, kind of hard to go after people after we've given them permission to to prune a tree.
Okay. Another question came in about, you didn't really show it, but I know you guys have some wooded areas. Do you have any recommendations on how best to manage like trees in a wooded area with like trails and stuff? Do you guys do that much?
You know, we don't. We bump up next to the Forest Reserve District of Cook County, and we don't have any of those trees inventoried, even though they're in our city limits technically. But the easiest way that I would say if you were to manage those is you would really need a tablet, so you would know what tree you were looking at if you were looking up the history on it, for example. So you can walk up right next to it, and on your screen it'll show you where you're standing and what tree is that you're looking at. That would be the most helpful, I guess. But I think you could track the work the same way. I actually used to work for the Forest Reserve District, and I was on a trails crew. So I could see how it would be really easy if you're doing work on a tree to just quickly pull out your tablet or even your phone and create a work record that you were there and you pruned the tree, and you can change its condition, etc.
Okay, yeah, and I know a lot of communities will map or manage, maybe high-risk trees along trails or other wooded areas, and even go down to maybe setting a diameter limit. Sometimes they'll inventory all the trees over 12 inches or 20 inches or 30 inches or something like that. Another question came in here around what is the best devices for performing inventories. And our experience is we use Panasonic Tough Pads for actually doing all of our tree inventories. Those have a really good battery life, are very tough, very utilized, but they're pretty expensive. They can be usually, I think they're around like $4,000. So for doing an inventory, those are a really good device, fully Windows based, with integrated cell cards and Wi-Fi. But we recommend you can use iPads and or like Microsoft Surfaces for maintaining your inventory, which I think is a little bit different than doing an inventory. So I personally like iPads because they're pretty affordable. There's a lot of outer box cases for them, and they're pretty ubiquitous out there. You can just run up to any store and get one in a couple hours if yours goes down. Um, and then let's see, a couple more came in. TreeKeeper, just so you know, if it works with Cartograph, we actually do have a partnership with Cartograph. So our TreeKeeper does seamlessly work with Cartograph, kind of just the push of a button. But there's another question that came in also about sharing data. And any kind of web-based software like TreeKeeper, most of them have the ability to integrate third-party APIs. So we have a number of systems that are integrated with like a Cities 311 or like a Cartograph or an in-house Esri product, something like that. So it's pretty easy, but also within TreeKeeper, you can download the shapefile and or Excel file and push that up to something. So the nice thing about that I always like to tell people is then you're working with a copy of the data, so you don't have to worry about messing up any of the real data out there as well. And trying to see here. There's one question here, Joe, about when you're using when you're recording your work. Sarah was interested in why you use the I instead of like creating a new work record. I think before you answer this, I always like to say that there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat, and TreeKeeper has many ways to do similar features, whatever works best for you. But I'm just curious. I thought that was interesting the way you showed that, Joe. Do you guys have a particular reason that you use the I feature instead of like a new work record or maybe other solution?
Well, creating an entirely new work record is kind of it's creating an additional step in our mind that doesn't really need to be there. So we already have the work record there. We just need to follow up to make sure that the work was actually complete. Honestly, the easiest thing is if there was another like button or switch or something that we could just flip on in that work record that we can automatically search from there. But this was just actually it was just a workaround to try to make the software work better for us. Since there wasn't a specific QA section in TreeKeeper, that was the easiest way that we were able to do it. So just by searching, by running a search for that I letter, for I stands for inspect, we're able to just hit that quick filter. It searches for the I for requested work orders and whatever other date criteria we have in that quick filter, and it works. But like you said, you can do it any way you want it to, really. This is just the way we found it easiest.
Yeah, thanks. And I think the last question here that we'll finish up on, and respect everybody's time. Again, I'll answer the other questions with an email. But Ryan asked, he's a state employee who does a lot of tree inventories for municipalities, and he's wondering any tips or how to make the inventories more useful for cities. John, if you want to take a stab at that first, then I can finish off. But just thinking about, like you said, I liked your people got on an ash high and did a lot of inventories around yours, and I remember that. And kind of lessons learned and anything you've seen on how to make inventories maybe more useful.
I think it's easier for us because we utilize the software every day. But if you get the inventory, you have to use the inventory. That's my biggest thing that I like to drive home is you have to use it. don't just collect the data and now you know that you have these trees at these coordinates on this street, etc. Figure out ways that you can utilize that data. So for us, we utilize the data by keeping track of all of our work there. So that makes it easy for us to continually update everything and then keep records of the work that is being done and all the inspections that are being done. That's my biggest piece of advice.
Yeah, I think you said exactly what I was thinking is, one thing that I always think about is, your data is, it's only going to be as good as the data, your tree inventory. And a lot of people tend to want to throw the baby out with the bathwater when they maybe get an old inventory or they inherit something and they go out and they see, oh man, there's a couple, errors here. This is really out of date. And, I think sometimes just starting with what you have is a good and starting to work with it. You'd probably be surprised what good information actually could be there. And then, yeah, using the information. I think it's like anything, trying to use it. I think when you're working with communities maybe that don't have an engaged city forester or an engaged tree board, that could definitely be challenging. And I would encourage you to maybe think of ways to get them engaged. iTree is usually a pretty good, safe conversation piece, to talk about the benefits of the trees. A lot of times, smaller communities or what I would say less engaged are really only focusing on the costs of it. Of course, there's the things about becoming a Tree City USA, but using maybe an inventory to get a growth award and get re-energized and re-excited about it. And then, my final thought is we're seeing a big push to make the inventories interactive and open to the public. So we didn't really talk about it today, but TreeKeeper does have a public-facing side to it where it does show the environmental benefits of it. And we just sent out an email to all of our TreeKeeper users, a video of how to create a quick filter like Joe was showing there, but for spring flowering trees, thinking everybody's sitting at home and people are walking their dogs more than have ever been walked. Now is a really good time to engage people with what you have out there in your public forest. So, creating some quick filters aimed at the public and, sending out some press releases, doing some social media posts, I think is another way to get people more engaged and get them to understand and see the benefits of the trees and get them excited about your urban forest. So, all right, well, with that, there's still some more questions that we didn't get to today, but Joe, I want to thank you very much for taking your time and sharing your information. There is the
Thank you.
ISA. Yeah, thank you. So there is the ISA CEU code there as well. And I will be emailing out a copy of a link to today's recorded webinar, as well as the survey for your feedback. And if you have any questions or anything, feel free. This is our contact information. So I hope everybody stays safe out there and makes the best of this time. And we'll talk to you later. Have a good one.